So thank you guys for joining. This is the third session of the leadership storytelling cohort. And I am so excited because this is the week, man. This is the week where it like gets hard, right? Where you have to like put pen to paper, you have to start writing that story. You take what you feel like you know in theory and start practicing it. So it's where the rubber meets the road. But if you get past this point, and I know you are, and we get into our fourth session where you're actually going to be presenting this to the group, then you are going to, I feel confident that the light bulb is going to come on, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I have got to do it this way every time I present an important message. So
I'm excited.
yes, I'm excited for you guys. I'm excited for you guys to experience the success of implementing this process with your clients, Preston, with your CPO, Lisa, with your coachees, Sue, with your stakeholders, Haley, and with your clients, David. So I'm really excited that we get to practice doing this and then report back. You know, I want to stay in touch and hear how it went. So during our fourth session, please do try to block out that 2-hour block because I want for everybody to have a chance to tell their message and their story. And I want everybody to have the opportunity to provide their insights, because now we're a team, right? And so we've got to stick with each other. We've got to commit to one another and provide the insights that we have gained throughout this process, and give that valuable feedback on the delivery of our messages and on our stories. So today I am actually going to let one of you begin to share some of the work that you've done. And then I'm going to let David start us off. And then after, because I've read his story, I think it's a great example. And all of you have done great work so far, and you're on a great trajectory. So I want to use this session to really dig in and see, okay, where are your pain points, where are you struggling the most? Because there's some common denominators that I think all of you are maybe wrestling with a little bit. And wrestling is good. It's a good thing. You should wrestle because once you've wrestled with it, it's ingrained in you. All right, so I'm going to let you share a brief synopsis of who your audience is, and maybe just kind of give us a quick rundown of the purpose of your story. You know what? Don't tell us the purpose of your story. Just tell us who the audience is, and then tell us the story, and then afterwards I'll ask a couple of questions of everybody else so that you can get some valuable feedback on the effectiveness of what you've done so far. And then I would like to open it up then for everybody else to share where they are in their process. Okay, David, take it away.
Okay. Well, Rance, I'll tell you what, I'm going to start off with a question. So I can give very little detail about who the audience is. So I can say who they are. And that I think would obviously be important. Do I want to talk about what their purpose is, or what their struggle is, or what their challenge is?
Yes.
Okay.
I think you should.
So I'll keep it really short. So I'm currently working with, I think probably the best way to describe it would be it's a venture capital firm that is it's old money, but it's being run by some fairly young members of the family. And they have purchased a number of companies, one of which includes a technology startup, which is actually in a different industry than the story that I'm going to tell. But the thing that they're struggling with is the company that they've started is growing really fast, and they are very concerned about losing the the flavor and the culture that the company has. And they've brought in an HR business partner, an HR director who's going to lead their HR programs. And she comes from a very big company, and they're very hesitant to adopt many of the practices that she wants to bring in. I think at this point, they're still seeing her as an outsider.
Mhm.
And so the story is really to help frame that up a bit more. And as I say that, I may have said too much, but I'll read the story now and I'll let you guys figure out what you think based on that. So Bob is the CEO of AEI Enterprises, a life sciences technology company startup that provides medical imaging services to major hospitals. The company's products are in high demand, and as a result, the organization is growing rapidly. Bob believes their key advantage is AEI's ability to react quickly to the changing marketplace and increasing federal regulations. Today, Bob is meeting with Charles, a senior partner in the venture capital firm providing most of AEI's startup capital. The meeting is going well. AEI is meeting all of Charles's expectations. Just as the meeting is about to close, Charles asks, Bob, how is the search for the VP of Operations position going? Did you interview the candidate recommended by our executive recruiter? Yes, Bob answers. He's got excellent experiences, his references check out, and he's got great connections in the industry. Great to hear, Bob, Charles responds. When do you expect him to start? Bob takes a deep breath. Well, Charles, we don't think he's going to work out. He spent too much time in big bureaucratic organizations. He's just not going to fit in our agile culture. He's already suggesting we need more structure and detailed policies and procedures, and he's not even walked in the door. Charles looks at his watch. Bob, we've been over this. You told us that you don't have anyone on the team with the knowledge or experience to take on this role. You don't have a solid development program to help your team grow quickly enough to meet these needs. Until you can, you're just going to have to bring in talent from the outside. Besides that, structure is necessary for larger organizations. Look, bring this guy onto the team and task him with creating a development plan for the organization. Bob leaves the meeting frustrated. How is he supposed to develop his team while meeting the demands of the startup? What could he possibly have done differently?
Oh, Brent, you're on mute.
Thank you, Preston. So let me ask the group, putting yourself kind of in the audience's shoes that David described to us at the beginning, do you feel like the characters are relatable?
For some reason, I wanted them to have last names in the beginning. I wanted to know their last names. I think because I was thinking Bob and Charles, and I'm like, that doesn't sound real. Who are they? Maybe if they have last names, or maybe more unique names.
Yeah.
That makes it a little more relevant, believable. It's a story that I'd want to read on my own. Is this something you're going to stand up and tell people? Or is it something people will be reading on their own?
That's a great question, Preston. I have the same feeling. I think it's a little bit long to include in a presentation. And it's actually, I would say the labor part that Rance mentioned is definitely true in this case. Ultimately, I think it would be better if we could have this in a bigger discussion. But I think I've got to pare it down a bit to do that.
And I think you could have two versions. You might have a version that you send to people to read, and then it's okay, the long form, but then a version of it where you stand up and present it a little bit shorter.
I like that.
And you would present it differently. You wouldn't keep saying Bob and Charles, you'd say, and then he, they respond to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so I wanted them to have last names. I like the story. And I don't know if I forgot I was on camera, so I closed my eyes and started to listen.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I think I was surprised when you had, when you kind of ended it without a conclusion. I was sort of looking for the hook. And so then he did that and it worked perfectly.
Oh,
Or
wow, thanks.
so they didn't follow his advice and then it all fell apart. So I was kind of looking for like, it felt like that cliffhanger. So I'm just waiting for the end of it. But I could relate to the story very much because I'm looking at a situation that's very similar to this right now. I'm like, yes, can't you see that if you don't do these things, your small company won't be able to grow? And so like, it's a very relatable story, but I think you've got to get one more piece on it. And it's got to illustrate what I want you to do.
Gotcha. So like an action.
Yeah, exactly.
Or call to
That's
action.
what it needs. It needs an action on it. Or you need to show an action and then we learn from either that was the right action or that was the wrong action. And here's why you don't want to do that.
Right.
That's
Right.
exactly what we're going to be talking about today on our deliver worksheet.
Oh, good.
So really that feeling that you had, Lisa, was spot on because you had this desire for resolution. So remember, relatable characters plus strong conflict equals a desire for resolution. The story has done its work. Now it's time for David to deliver his message.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to talk about in this this piece. Okay, go ahead, Sue.
No, I was just going back to your question. You had asked, are the characters relatable? And I actually found them very relatable. I was following and relating. Like I felt like what I got from it was, you know, small agile startup, big, you know, corporate, you know, big organization kind of thinker. How are those things going to mesh? Is that really going to solve the problem? Is that really what the startup needs? It's like, it needs a whole bunch of stuff, but does it need that? I don't know. So I was, you know, I was following it, like I was relating to it, following it. So yes, to your question, Rance, I found them relatable.
And maybe even trying to kind of like figure out,
Yeah,
like you're kind of in the situation, you're like, what is the best solution here for this company?
right. And if the next piece is like message, like I feel like I'm teed up for it. Like I'm like, oh, what's the punch? You know, like I'm teed up for like you saying, okay, in that scenario. And of course, me as coach, I'm like already thinking of things that they should be doing and not doing, but or no, questions I would ask so that they might consider things they could and should be, you know, whatever. But yeah, I'm with it. Like I'm relating.
Haley, what about you? Did you feel like the characters were relatable? I think that you're on mute as well. You're following.
Yeah, thanks. I think I'm just personally trying to catch up what we're doing at the moment because I was 5 minutes late to the class.
Okay.
And then I hear somebody telling this more wonderful story and I'm thinking, oh crap, what am I missing? What have I not done here? So I feel a little behind, so I apologize. But to answer your question, yeah, I think some backstory helped, knowing that it was a small company. I think you said it was an old money company, but ran by new people.
Right.
That was a good piece of information.
Thanks. Yeah, I've not ever worked with a group like this before. But essentially what happened is they sold the father's business and they made a lot of money. Most of the family is now doing foundations or hanging out on the beach. But there's one grandson that has decided that he wants to keep the fires burning and has started this venture capital fund that they're running out of the same town where the grandfather's business was.
Wow. David, I wondered if you might be able to just tell us the story without looking at it. I think that you could.
I think so. It's pretty close to reality. So essentially the gist of the story is.
Well, hold on.
Sorry.
So let's practice a little bit with delivery. So let's say that we are your people that you're presenting to at this company. And let's say that you're getting ready to start this presentation, but you're going to start us off with a story. try giving the people either new names or last names, like Preston suggested, just to try it out and
Okay.
see if it resonates with us. Try also to just tell us a story as if you're just remembering it from a memory, like you would tell a childhood memory.
Okay.
That's putting you on the spot, but hey,
No worries.
safe place.
Improv.
Kind of wishing I hadn't done the assignment now, but that's okay. No, really. It's honestly, I appreciate the opportunity to stretch a little bit.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do this morning is, as we've been talking about the challenges that your organization is facing, it brought up a memory of a situation that I think is similar to what you're going through, that a colleague of mine shared with me. So I'm going to tell you the story about Amit. And Amit is the CEO of a startup company in the healthcare industry. Amit's company has developed some very innovative technologies, and they've become very much in demand in the healthcare industry. And so Amit has a problem. The problem is his organization is growing substantially and really faster than he had planned. So it's going beyond, it's sort of blowing out all of his targets. His strategy is way behind where it needs to be. And he's gone to a venture capitalist to try to get things moving. And so the venture capitalist representative is an individual by the name of Vaughn. And he and Vaughn are going to meet to talk about how Amit's organization has moved forward. And so in preparation of this meeting, Amit puts all of his financials together. He goes in and he does just a phenomenal job of helping Vaughn understand how his organization has been able to respond very quickly to changes in the healthcare industry, as well as regulatory responsibilities that are coming from the government. Everything's going really well. And then Vaughn says, okay, well, now let's talk about your personnel and your human capital plan. And Amit says, yeah, absolutely. And Vaughn says, well, I recommended a recruiter to you, an executive recruiter, and I believe they identified some people that can help fill some gaps, particularly for your vice president of operations role that's been vacated. And Amit says, yes, I did speak with her. She did send us a candidate, really solid. He had great experience. The only hesitation that I have, Vaughn, is he's been in really large organizations, and he's already talking about bringing in that bureaucracy that is so anti-culture for us. We started out with 10 engineers. We can respond quickly. We can work through problems. We don't have roles that get in the way of being effective. And Vaughn says, Amit, we've been having this conversation. We continue to have it. You can't continue to operate your company as if there are only 10 people there. You're already up to 60 people, and you're going to continue to grow. If you don't grow with the organization, you will fail. So what I'm going to suggest to you is bring this person into the organization, get them into a role, partner with them to create a development program so that you can start developing your people into roles that they can fill, so that you don't have to go outside for every rec that you have. But this has to happen now. You've let this go too long, and we're behind the 8 ball at this point. So pull the trigger and let's move forward. Amit leaves the meeting extremely frustrated. He felt like he'd had a good relationship with Vaughn. Vaughn had been very open to his suggestions and had stayed out of the day-to-day management of the organization. And now he's really wondering, what possibly could I have done differently to correct this problem? So we've been growing so fast. Everybody's been working so hard. There's just been no time to develop anybody. And we just can't afford to lose the culture that we've worked so hard to create from the beginning. So what should I do now?
Okay, thank you.
I don't even think I looked at it.
Reactions to that.
I liked it better because I felt like he was talking to me. Not that I liked it better, but the other one, like I said, it felt like I should be reading it on my own. This one felt like it was more of a story that's talking to me. I wanted to answer him. I wanted to interject a couple times. I had to hold my tongue.
I think it was more relatable as well, and because it was more conversational. And the fact that you added Amit as a new name that I'm not aware, it's not a normal name, a name I come across a lot. That was kind of intriguing. It seemed like probably you didn't make that up. And
No.
so, to your point, Joe and Bill kind of thing. So I like that. And it was, yeah, I thought that was, I think the way you ended it up was good as well. So it was much, much better.
Thank you.
The second time around, it was much more conversational, much more interesting.
That's
Thank you.
I don't know if what's coming to me is if I'm going off-road rants, like if I'm going beyond like the point of where we're supposed to be. I was just going to say a couple things. So bring me back if I'm going too far for where we need to be right now. But so a couple things came to me. The first half, like right there, but then for some reason I'm getting lost around the purpose of the story. Like if it is your audience is the VC, like I'm getting a little lost around like let's say you're about to say a punch, if you're saying this story, like this is a lie. Okay, hold on. We're just talking about a story right now. Because like what I'm thinking right now is who am I receiving that story? Am I the VC receiving the story? Mm-hmm. Because I was just getting caught like, okay, if you were sharing this story, like what's the now what from the story?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Rand, I might make you chuckle. There was one, I felt the ghost of a potential metaphor in one part where it could have brought it to life maybe a tiny bit more when you're talking about the VC's reaction to Amit. Okay, by the way, I have a just side comment. Is Amit Israeli? Amit? Indian. Okay, great. Then I'm not going to go there because I kept wanting to hear Amit, and I'm like, is he pronouncing the name right? Then okay, great. Amit, go for it. It's wrong culture. So
no worries.
So with Amit and the VC, I don't know. I almost feel like just to like lift up with the VCs telling Amit. That's where I started going a little like I wasn't sure how to follow the story because I wasn't sure if the punchline and the takeaway is with Amit or it's with the VC. And I got a touch lost. And I was almost thinking like if the VC in your story shared a metaphor to Amit around the power of not running the company like a teenager, and now you got to run it like an adult, so you can grow and build capacity. I felt like there was a little bit of a higher metaphor right there that could have lifted the story a little more. Okay,
right.
Now am I going too far, Rance?
Stories birth stories, right? So when you start thinking in terms of story, it's like, oh yeah, we could put another little story here. But yeah, absolutely. You could use the VC could use a metaphor to help Amit understand what he's talking about. If I don't know that if it's necessary, but I would say it would definitely add another layer to that. Thank you, Sue. That was great. You're not off track. You're good.
Okay.
And I do think, to Sue's point, but I think, David, you did this in the beginning. You entered us into the middle of a conversation where you said, like, I forget what you said in the beginning, but it was obvious that you had been having a conversation about something to set the context. And then you said, oh, let me tell you a story about someone who went through something similar.
Right.
So I think that was the context too that you might be missing, is there was a conversation before to set the context, but he didn't. He cleverly just started at the end of that piece.
Okay.
Right. Well, and to be honest, there were two reasons I went with the story that I went with is this actually mirrors, I think, the situation that the client is in. And just full disclosure, the startup actually brought me in. And as a result, I've now been connected to what they refer to themselves as a private equity organization. The main challenge that I think they're having is both they actually refer to him as the president of the technology company, and the director of the private equity firm. They're college buddies. And so they like this organization is small and that it can move really quickly. Most of the people they've hired are engineers that the president went to school with. I should say the original 10. They started the organization more or less as friends and colleagues, and they've grown it to about 60 people. And they're still trying to run the ship without really having job descriptions. And so the team is starting to wrestle back and forth with, I realize this is a problem and maybe you can solve it, or maybe I could solve it, but I don't know if I should solve it or if you should solve it. Or maybe you should solve it because I'm too busy doing other things that I think are more important. And it's creating a lot of tension, but both the president and the director are very resistant to the idea of creating any kind of standard operating procedures. And they did actually pass on a senior executive because he came from a larger company in the same industry. And his comment during his interview was, you guys have got to build more structure here. This isn't going to work. And so they heard that as he's anti our hands-on culture, so we can't bring him in. So they've got this position that they need that's now been vacant for 3 or 4 months. And what the other original 10 have all identified is they're clearly not at all being in any way, shape, or form considered for this position, because they'd rather leave it open than promote any one of them. So it's created a whole lot of problems for the organization. And I think that the commitment that the 2 leaders have made is, we're not going to sacrifice the culture no matter what. And in the end, they may actually sacrifice the entire organization.
That's a powerful statement.
That's your powerful statement right there.
Powerful statement.
Yeah.
So that's where I want to get them. Right now, they're not ready to fully accept that. But I'm hoping that by sharing this story with them, that they'll start to understand that, okay, we're going to have to start looking at this in a different way.
I wonder, David, if that statement, if there is a metaphor there,
Yeah, I do think
illustrates that.
definitely.
An
a
image,
Yeah,
maybe.
that illustrates the. I'm sorry, Haley, I interrupted you.
An image. Similarly, the image you came up with me with dragging all this extra stuff while we're being amazing, you know.
Some sort of some sort of metaphor that illustrates a time when someone or group of people were so focused on one thing that they lost everything. There's lots of stories out there like that, right? That might be your better story for this group.
I've been in a couple organizations that have grown really quickly without structure and almost falled over. So what I tell people is, you have something growing so fast without structure, it has to fall over at some point.
Like Jenga, it's like Jenga. If you looked at, if you wanted a good analogy, it's like, I went to one of those axe throwing places and they had the super big Jenga and they were like 2x4s. And I was doing this with my kids who are adults, and we had so much fun, but eventually it's going to topple over.
Yeah.
Right.
And you kept looking at it and going, ooh, it's really tipping here or there. And it's the same analogy for a small, quickly growing company. You can see the hole. It's like that job they haven't filled is that hole where it's just teetering, right?
That also is interesting. Now we're all excited. Okay, I'll let Sue talk after this. It's also interesting because you're using the exact same resources that exist in that Jenga tower to try and build and keep
keep fixing it.
But eventually those resources are going to run out. or not be enough to sustain the structure. Oh,
Uh-huh.
Jenga, thank you.
It's a good analogy, right? So maybe you throw that into the end.
I like that.
Sue, what about yourself?
I had another one come to me, Preston, while you were speaking. But by the way, I realized what I was trying to articulate earlier, David, is like I wasn't sure if the story was for the VC or for the company. That's where I was getting a little lost.
Right.
But now I know it's for more the company. I actually thought it was for the VC. So anyway, but the analogy I thought of when Preston you were speaking was all like if you think about a human body, I was thinking about all the different systems, the muscular system, my God, I can't recall anything because I haven't slept in 3 days. Give me systems, guys. The circulatory system, all of that.
Yeah, thoracic, cardiac.
All those amazing systems and doctrine and all of that. But imagine if all that was built without a skeletal system. There was no spine. And so you've got all these amazing complex systems developing, but there's no spine or structure or skeleton to hold the thing up. And right now, Preston, you triggered this. It's like they're building this amazing company, but there's no skeleton to like make sure all the tissue and everything holds everything together. And without that, they don't have an upright structure that can like grow and expand and live to God willing 120.
I like it. I think that's tremendous. I like that one and the Jenga story. I'm going to play with both of those.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, first of all, excellent writing, excellent thought that went into the creation of that story, David. And I hope that every one of us gets that, has that kind of light bulb moment of, maybe the story is just simpler. Maybe the story and the profound thing that we want to tell our audience is a little deeper than our first effort to create that story. So awesome.
Thank you.
You're so
Thank you. That was fun.
I think metaphor could serve, the metaphor serve, because no one's going to argue with the Django or the other example. Those are just true.
Right.
True. Start with that short story and then say, and here is the detailed example that I have. And it's kind of like, if you just tell the story of Amit and the detailed example, they can say, well, that's not us. We're not like, but you tell the metaphor, everyone has to say, oh, that's true. Can't argue with that. Then you do the Amit example, and then you come back to that. That's you.
Yeah. And I think the same is true, Preston, with your story, where you're using a case study of another customer. What is at the crux of that? Like, what's that Aesop's fable moral that you are trying to get across to them, right? When, that stories work for training. That's what you're trying to convince them of, right? And having this case study is awesome. Maybe adding a little metaphor there also would be a very powerful kind of hit at home thing. Awesome. Any other comments about this experience that we've had with David going through his story? Thinking about your own story even?
Yeah, I'm thinking about my story and I'm like, oh, David's was really well thought and you like put a lot of effort into that, and mine keeps changing. I had to call Rants for like moral support. But I'm thinking that's what I need too, is like the Jenga moment or the example moment, because I have been working on, so I've got a really good story, and it's about a guy I actually know, and he's actually speaking at a thing for me today. And so I don't want to give away the guy when I tell the story, but I need something to make it, I need like that final hook in it. Because the story is compelling and it's like, and then this happened. And so that's why it's important, but it kind of needs something else. Like, yeah, so I'm gonna, that you gave me a pause there and that was good.
Awesome. I want to take a minute to review how far we've come so far. So let's just take a look at this Discover sheet. So we can, now that you've kind of got a better sense of how things are flowing by doing so first of all, you did the audience profile. I don't think anybody had trouble with that. I mean, you really nailed that. And I am really grateful that that was a helpful experience for you to help you see your audience as people who have their own stories to tell, people who have their own lives outside of work. So on this Discover page, you take what you know about your audience and you decide up here in number 1 what the purpose of your message is, right? How do I want to influence this audience? Do I want to connect with them, inspire them, guide them, persuade them? And that right there is kind of already, it's like you have to make some decisions there, right? What am I trying to change here? Am I trying to change the relationship between us? Am I trying to change their perspective on things? Or are you responding to a change in strategy or operations? Are you implementing that change? Or are you trying to persuade people and have them commit to something, right? And then what should they do differently as a result of your message, and how should they feel differently? And by now, I think all of you have really settled in on those 2 things, which is a great start. And so what they should do differently, think of that as the call to action. What you want them to do as a result of your message is their call to action, your audience's call to action. How they should feel differently is your audience's feelings. And then why might they resist my message? I think all of you were great with that. And then the audience story. So now that you have kind of defined some things in your audience profile and these things at the top, what the purpose of your message is to that audience, now you're creating your audience story. So this is not the story you're going to tell them. This is their story, right? This is a story about them, your audience, who is struggling to do the thing that you want them to do as a result of your message, and why they are resisting that message or might resist it, how they are currently feeling, and the purpose of your story from up above in number 1 to help bring a change from number 1. And then I want them to feel, how do I want this audience to feel differently? So this is all about the audience and your message. This is the backstory work that you've done. The design worksheet that you've been working on for the past 2 weeks, or 2 days, however, panned out for you. Here's the overall view, right? The story produces a desire for resolution. Now, one thing that I really loved about your story, David, is first of all, you had dialogue in it. And even in your second version, you were the people in the story talking. I really liked that. And that's very natural, right? So Amit said, and then you say what he said, right? That was very nice. So relatable characters plus strong conflict, you really led us to that point of, I want to know what happens next. You know, how does this get resolved? And we're going to talk about that in our next worksheet. And then deciding on, what stories come to mind. So David did a hypothetical story here, right? It was based on truth, but it was something that Vaughn and Amit were 2 different, were not real people, but it was a real situation. It was a type of a real situation, and these are types of real people. They didn't seem stereotyped or anything. They seemed like real people. And then, describing his characters in relation to the audience, like, is this audience really going to relate to this character? And Lisa, you gave a great example. I think it was last time when you were talking about when you were doing DISC, and you were telling, maybe you have used in the past, like Batman, or,
yeah,
Batman's DISC profile or whatever, and people would just check out. But when they became real people, all of a sudden they checked back in.
Mm-hmm.
And then the conflict related to the action that you want your audience to take. And we can see in David's story, very much so was that conflict of the character was that internal conflict. Like, I don't want to compromise the culture of the company. And so I'm rejecting anything outside of that. Right. And what he wants them to do is accept that there has to be some structure in the company. So spot on with that. So think of that conflict in relation to what you want your audience to do, and then describe the consequences of that conflict. Obviously, this David has described what some of those consequences are for this company that he's telling this story to. So great. As a result of them not accepting somebody from the outside, they are having all of these internal conflicts, right? And if they continue to resist that, they're going to continue to have those problems. That's what you put there. And then the second page of the design worksheet is writing the story itself. And David, you did a great job of this. You described the main characters in this block. You describe what they were doing prior to the conflicts. If you think of a story like, usually you'll describe a little bit of what happens right before. So he's in this meeting with his venture capital consultant guy, and they're having a conversation about this, about the business. And then what action initiates the conflict? So the venture capitalist says, hey, you need to do this. You need to hire this guy. And how does the main character respond? He's already rejected the guy, right? And in his mind, he's checked him out. He's like, this cannot happen. And so then he wrote the story, right? And like Lisa said, it ended in this kind of suspenseful moment, which brings us to the last worksheet. So if your story is ending at a suspenseful moment, boom, that's awesome. That's awesome. Now your story may answer some of the things that we're going to look at in the deliver worksheet. Do y'all see this on my screen? It says deliver at the top.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So let's talk about this and maybe use David as an example here. So you'll see at the top, you remember on the design side, we had your story leads to to a desire for resolution. And that's what we felt at the end of David's story, which is awesome. Now that they have that desire for resolution, now let's put our message there, which will lead to their action. Okay. So the first step in this, in the delivery phase, is to unite the story with your message. So describe the lesson learned, the vision for the future illustrated by the story, and how it applies to my message. So here, David, this might be the Jenga story, right? Because the Jenga story illustrates the lesson learned from the story you just told. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Or it may be just an explanation of, Preston, how your solution is going to bring relieve the pain of your client. And this is where also the message of, for Preston individually, this is that storytelling for training works. Or for Haley, I've got this. You're convincing your stakeholders, I've got this. We're making great progress, and I've got this, and I know how to fix the problem. And for Lisa, without the extra resources, that leader that we're trying to reach with our programming is not going to happen. Like, they're going to continue to wrestle with those things. And Sue, for your audience, where this hits is if these leaders that are supposed to be supporting this agile initiative in this company, if they continue to resist that, this is where the message comes in, and your story has done its action of leading them up to that point of desire for resolution. Now you hit them with that message. You could keep going the way you're going, and just think that this whole new process is just going to happen. But this is how things could be if you do support this and get actively involved. And so number two is articulating that message, right? So you have this transition moment at the beginning. This is what this story has to do with what I want to tell you. Now this is what I want to tell you. So appeal to their intellect, appeal to their emotion, refer back to that story, bring in a metaphor, whatever needs to happen to make sure that that message is clearly articulated. Use plain language, support your message and your story with visuals only if they add understanding. Try to do it without any visuals first. And if you're like, you know what, I just need to like bring this home by sharing this visual with them. So David, to make you regret even more doing your assignment, how would you? Actually, everybody did the assignment, but I'm just picking on you because your story seemed to be the most fleshed out of all of them. So, how would you answer number one and number two?
I think what I would want to do, and actually it's funny because as I got the feedback that I got, and as you were talking, I've kind of been thinking about, what is their real problem? And I think that the real problem is they have this belief that if they adopt standard operating procedures, that's going to destroy their culture. And so it's a very absolute sort of black and white thinking. We're either going to be this kind of organization or we're going to be like everybody else. And what's occurred to me is that there are maybe not a lot, but there are examples of organizations that have grown very successfully and have maintained what I think most people would consider to be an unusual and yet still successful culture. And the company that comes to mind for me is one that you and I talked about, which is Southwest Airlines. And so I think what I would want to do is talk about how if you stay on the path you're on, then ultimately what you're looking at becoming that Jenga tower, or potentially the body that doesn't have the skeleton. But then if we look at companies that have done this successfully, they've managed to transition from a company that may have been originally sketched out as a vision on the back of a napkin into an organization that competes at a high level with lots of employees, and yet maintain that original sort of scrappy, we're going to do it different culture. And so I think what I'd like to do is to talk about how, if you stay where you are, it may feel right, but you won't really be able to grow. You could possibly say, we're going to reduce the number of customers we have. We're only going to serve a certain number of clients, and keep it small and keep it agile and maintain the culture there. But if your destiny is to grow, then you have to find the right way to do that. And then I think talking about like how to get that done is where you start talking about what the future could look like.
Yeah. That's a great point, because, convincing someone and then they are with you and then like, okay, how do we do it? You better have a plan. You better have a plan and say, this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So, and I know that you guys know that, but it's good to remember, this doesn't negate the work that you have to put into actually making the plan.
No, and I think Rance, that's a really good point, because when you look at leadership, a lot of leaders have stories or they have illustrations of things they're frustrated with, but they don't have that next thing. They don't have the plan. Oh, I don't have enough resources. I can't do this. I'm overworked. My team's disengaged. And then they come to me, they're like, what do I do? And I'm thinking, we have to have that plan. And so here are some 3 things I want to be able to change. So I think that in any storytelling, you need to have that so what about it. And what are you going to do? And what's your next step? I love that cat, Sue. That's so funny.
Oh, I'm just seeing that.
I always have little visitors. She and I and her sister are the only girls in the house, so I let them visit whenever.
I thought you guys could probably hear my pug snoring the entire day. She's so loud today.
That's what that was. I did hear the pug this time.
Yes, she's really, I had to go over and like bump her and she's like, what? What's wrong?
So then number 3 is, so thank you, David, for sharing that. And then for all of those observations, it is important that once you have convinced them with your story and with your message, that plan that you have ready for them. And isn't it interesting too, that when we're telling stories, when we get into storytelling, everything all of a sudden becomes very concrete. Like David, you just said, I'm beginning to realize what the real problem is. And I have to attribute that, I think, at least in part, to the fact that you made a story around it. And that you're thinking in terms of story, right? Because it brings us down to the real world. And then what would you say would be your clear call to action to them? Just off the top of your head, what would you say that you want them? And this is really from number 2 on the Discover page. How would you articulate that now?
Oh, thanks, Sue. I like that. I think for me, there are several things that have come up just through the discussions I've had, and then have been sort of strengthened from this exercise. But I think the clear call to action that I would talk with them about, I think one of the things that they should start doing now, because they've got a really solid list of examples of things that they've been able to do that help them to overcome their competition by doing things much quicker. And I think capturing those stories and making sure that those become a part of their culture story. So when they talk about the company, they say, well, this is what we did, and this is how it worked out, and this is why we believe this is a pillar of our culture. Then it becomes easier for people who come in that will probably never meet the president and may not even know about the private equity company, for them to relate to, this is what's expected. And that then translates hopefully seamlessly into what your standard operating procedures are. And so I think there's a way, and maybe the first clear call to action is to realize that just because you're growing doesn't mean that you have to transition into the thing that you're the most afraid of, which is this big, slow, bureaucratic organization. And so I think the first one is to establish that awareness that you have to do things differently, but you don't have to do things the way that your competition is doing things.
Yeah, excellent. It's not an either or. Thank you for sharing that. And then lastly, evaluate the execution. And this would be something that you do after you've delivered the message, which is, did your audience do what you had hoped they would do? Did they feel how I hoped they would feel? So as we have one more minute, I just wanted to ask, is anybody having a particular pain point? Do you feel confident to go forward, complete that design worksheet? And then I just uploaded the Discover worksheet for you to download as well. Any questions or any particular pain points that you want to make sure we talk about?
So what's the format for the next one? It's a deliver work. So how is that going to work?
So the way it'll work is pretty much the way David set up his story. And then, of course, he would then follow that story with his message and that call to action, which you're going to identify on that deliver worksheet. So that's what you'll be working on. You'll be fleshing out that story. You'll be practicing it a little bit so that it comes across as very natural. And then you will be delivering the message that comes after the story. And we're going to be your audience. And each one of us will have a little rubric, and we're going to just complete it. It's not, this is not, You've Got Talent or whatever that show is.
Yeah.
But we are going to give effective feedback to one another, and we're going to score each other too, because I think it's healthy to
Okay.
just, give each other some flat out great feedback to one another. And then we'll tally the scores at the end, and whoever has the highest score will win a prize.
Oh,
There is a prize for the winner.
nice. I like
fun.
that.
Just for fun. So yeah, I'll be giving you all a rubric so that you can just for each person be able to give them that kind of effective feedback that we're looking for. And it'll be similar to what we offered David today. So that our messages can be honed, and then you guys can go out into the world, deliver that message, and knock it out of the park.
Okay, awesome.
All right.
And so will Jay be there as well? Is he coming back?
Yes, Jay was not able to make it today. Neither was Alex.
Yeah.
They both contacted me before this session, so I miss them. I wish they
I
were
know,
with us.
right?
But I'm meeting with them one-on-one.
Okay.
And you're welcome to sign up for a one-on-one with me on that link on the website. Tomorrow, I'll be available until 11:30. So I can't do 11:30 to 12. And then the following Thursday, I'll be open for the full 2 hours. If you have any, you're working on it, you just want to do a practice run, or you just want to get some feedback with me one-on-one before you present it to the group, schedule some time with me, even if it's outside that Thursday time.
How long do we have to speak?
Since there are seven people, I would say let's do, what's that? I think try to keep it around 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay.
Because we want to also give time for feedback to each person as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And are you going to have like a feedback rubric, or are we just going to go around the room and do feedback? You will have a rubric. Okay.
Yeah, each one of you will have a rubric and be able to deliver the feedback that you've collected during that.
Cool. I'm
Yes.
excited.
I just want to share. Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
Go ahead. I want to know what the prize is.
I'm not telling you. It's a surprise.
It's going to be a book. Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Sue.
No, if it's okay, I want to share a little nugget takeaway it was like a mini aha of something you said, Rance, as you were taking us through the review. You said two words that for me really hit home. And it was make decisions. And it's like this structure you're giving us is like this magnifying glass on putting a process around empathy and around like, what is our audience thinking? And some of us are probably born with like doing that more naturally than others, but this kind of like levels the playing field a bit. It's like your process you're teaching us levels that playing field, whether we're intuitive or not or whatever, forcing us to go through it. Because I've always been someone who maybe has a little bit of intuition where I can do things on the spot, but what I don't do is make decisions. And so making decisions ahead, how much more powerful can we be when we speak and share? Because I have to make decisions. I mean, anyway, I know it's not like a key part of the overall like process, but wow, is it a powerful tool that we have to be doing all throughout, is make decisions and then develop from there. Anyway, it was just a real thing that hit me in the head when you said that as you were going through your review.
Thank you. I feel inspired now. Thank you so much. And that is a great point. So I want to thank you all for staying on a little bit longer just to make sure everybody's questions were answered, and for that last bit of inspiration from Sue, which is always wonderful. And so, yeah, schedule some time with me if you need it. Otherwise, I will see you in 2 weeks, and we will have a presentation party.
Yay. Okay.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Ray.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.